Hello everyone, this is the Red Riot Robot with the first video of the year. This is Logging 2025. This is going to be a ranking and a cataloging of every game that I played in 2025. I played a grand total of 70, so this will be a decently long video. At the end of each month, I will be showing slides where the games have placed in my estimation of ranking. Note that these games did not have to come out this year, they just are the games I played. So with all of that out of the way, let's get right into it. January. Alright, let's start with the first game that I finished this year. American Arcadia. Not only was this the first game that I finished this year, this was the first game that I tried to do a new series that kind of failed, and that was the A to Z challenge, which I kind of gave up on. It just wasn't doing it for me. This game is a cinematic platformer with the veneer of The Truman Show. You have two characters you play as, one who is the guy in the show itself who's trying to escape, and someone who's on the outside who's able to hack the show and help him along the way to help get out. And honestly, it was a pretty good game. I do think that there are a lot better cinematic platformers out there. The puzzles themselves were kind of simple. I will say one of the things that I'll probably remember most about this game are the performances by the voice actors. So the first game that I finished landed at number 50. Next, the second game that I played, Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. It will be no surprise to anyone who's heard of this game that this game is not very good. It is one of the most flatline experiences I've ever played. And what I mean by flatline, I mean that this game does not improve or get worse in any way throughout its entire runtime. And its runtime is long. You would have a better time watching grass grow. I, for some odd reason, believed that this game would have any bravery in its final seasons. Because this was supposed to be a live service, I decided to kind of bull rush through all of the seasons to see like what the story was after the main campaign, when the main campaign itself was not very good and it was not worth it. I spent 50 hours. This is 50 hours of the most bare bones, lacking of level design, mind-numbing experience I've ever had the displeasure of experiencing. And despite what I've just said, there is only one game that is below this. This is number 69 in our list. It is in the Burning Forest. The only reason there's one game below it is it's a game that was broken. If that game wasn't broken, this game would be at the bottom because it's not broken. It functions very well, but there's no reason to play it. There's a reason this game, within a few months of its launch, I was able to purchase this on launch $70 game for $2.50. That's Suicide Squad. It's landed at number 69. All right, I'm gonna put the next two together. This is Cyber Manhunt 1 and 2. These are landing into the dirt category. They're games where you profile criminals so that you can build a case against them, and you do this over things through the internet, and it works. I don't remember the story. I don't remember any of the cases. It's fine. Cyber Manhunt, the first game, is number 61, and Cyber Manhunt 2 is number 60. It was slightly better from what I remember. Past that, we get to one of the first games, and this game stayed at the top for a very long time and is one of the biggest pleasures I've had because this is a true return to form for a series, and that is Dynasty Warriors Origins. I am so happy with this. This is probably the best Dynasty Warriors since Dynasty Warriors 3 on like the PS2. I do have a couple of problems with this game, but those problems are very minimal. They're very surface level and they're not worth bringing up. This is a game that took the formula of Dynasty Warriors and they finally added actual change to how like weapons work and differentiated them outside of just timing and stuff. Every weapon has a different mechanic to it on how it plays. We have squad mechanics, which have been in previous ones. We have duels. You have, regardless of campaign, they all end on a really big high note, especially the battle on the river. You know what I'm talking about. This is genuinely one of the best games in the series, and I am so happy that we finally got this. I'm happy that they have done what they've done with Dynasty Warriors, especially after the travesty that was Dynasty Warriors 9. This, Dynasty Warriors Origins, is my number 2. This game stayed up there. Occasionally I like to launch this and play it, and it stayed relevant. And not only that, it's getting DLC this month in January. So I'm looking forward to that. And that's January. All right, February. I only got 3 games done, but that's fine. The first game in February I finished was Ninja Gaiden 2 Black. Now, if you know the Ninja Gaiden series, you know that the Black subtitle kind of has a connotation to it that means that it's harder and also balanced around that difficulty, like the first Ninja Gaiden Black. That's not the case here. They're using this title for the clout. That being said, it's still Ninja Gaiden 2 for the most part. I'm going to be honest, Ninja Gaiden 2 I don't like as much as the first one. I still think it's a good game, but it's never been my favorite in the series. It's better than 3. Ninja Gaiden 2 Black is definitely better than Ninja Gaiden 2 Sigma. That was a travesty. This game wound up getting into my number 53. I still think it's good, and if you've never played Ninja Gaiden 2, or you don't want to get an Xbox and play it on backwards compatibility, I would recommend it. After that, I played Blade Chimera. This is Team Ladybug's new Metroidvania. These guys have made a couple of Metroidvanias that I love a lot, especially Touhou Luna Nights, game where you play as a character who can throw knives and stop time, which I still think is their best game. Blade Chimera is definitely trying to hit that Castlevania Symphony of the Night aesthetic, and it does an okay job at it. It's definitely not as good as that. I don't know. It feels like it just needed a bit more. Despite this being their like 4th or 5th game, this feels like the most simplistic game that Team Ladybug has put out. And in a way, it's a little disappointing. I still think it's good, but yeah, they've done better. It got rank 48. And to round out February, we have, I don't know how to say this name, Ropuka's Idle Island. This is at number 64. All I remember about this game is that the music put me to sleep. It's an idle game you're supposed to put on in the background of your computer and like watch a little frog cut grass. March. This was probably one of the better months that I had. It started off with RoboCop Rogue City. This game, despite being a licensed title, is a lot better than it has any right to be. It has a really good upgrade system for your pistol. The side weapons that you're able to get aren't bad. You have 2 modes that you go through with this game. One is where you're just walking around and talking and helping the random people of Detroit. The other is the more mission-oriented first-person shooter type levels, where they're very straightforward and all you're doing is just killing people. And yeah, it does everything right to make you feel like RoboCop. You feel like a big, clunky robot man. And despite that, it's really fun. I especially like that this game has a dash. And all it is very clearly RoboCop stepping really fast. If you actually want a really good first-person shooter, RoboCop wound up at number 34. While I was playing a lot of other games, I was also playing Final Fantasy VII Remake Integrate. This is like the package of Final Fantasy VII Remake with the DLC that includes Yuffie. My opinions of this remake have sort of stayed the same. Square Enix definitely had a greedy decision to make this remake, but the fact is, this remake is still really good, especially gameplay-wise, and I will say retroactively that some of the stuff that's set up here has gotten worse because of the next game, but we'll talk about that later. That aside, the DLC that's included with this is actually pretty good. I like some of the side activities it introduces. Playing as Yuffie is very fun. Overall, this is a really good game still, and I still stand by really liking this. And this got a rating of number 16. And finally, probably a little bit of a disappointment because it's a spiritual successor to the director's previous works with Danganronpa, is Master Detective Archive Raincode. Raincode, I think, suffers from the fact that you don't have a core cast, and each individual mystery gets its own cast of characters, and so it's a lot easier to figure out what's going on. The other issue is the core cast you do have just isn't as strong as the Danganronpa casts. It's just not. Despite it being a disappointment, it does have a few moments that really shine, especially one at the end that the game actually got a one-up on me, and I love it for that. If you liked the Danganronpa series, I would recommend this only if you like it, and I would say keep your expectations mild. April. In April, I decided to replay The Last of Us through its remake, The Last of Us Part 1. I still stand by how I feel about this game all these years later, in that I think The Last of Us is a good story, but I've never loved this game. I still think it's very good. It's just, I don't know, I've never gotten the praise for its gameplay, being that I still feel it's a fairly bog standard third-person shooter with some stealth mechanics. However, the story raises this above everything else, and because of that, I would say this got a rank of 21. After that, I played the first Berserker Kazan. This is the Korean Souls-like that came out that's based off of the DNF MMO. As far as Souls-likes go that aren't made by FromSoft, I would say this fits like in the direct middle of quality from them. It's definitely not as good as, say, a Lies of P, but it's a lot better than like a Lords of the Fallen. The only thing I will say that it does have going for it is it introduced a mechanic that I think other Souls-like should introduce, which is rewarding players for trying to defeat bosses. The further you get in defeating a boss, the more resources you get. So say you don't kill the boss, the game will still give you X amount of experience for trying. And I think that that is such a good way to get people to try to beat a boss instead of turning bosses into giant brick walls where you feel like you have to go grind somewhere else. Instead, you can grind the boss slowly. Because it's like a middling Souls-like, this got just into the good category of 55. After that, I played AI The Somnium Files. This is the new series by Horikoshi. I just got to it this year, even though this one came out in 2019. His previous work was the Zero Escape series, a series that I love greatly and has introduced me to a lot of puzzles and philosophical thoughts. I will say that I don't like AI The Somnium Files as much as Zero Escape. I do think that Somnium Files are much more casual friendly than Zero Escape is, especially the main protagonist, Kaname Date, is probably one of the best characters in all of Horikoshi's work. But despite that, I still think this is a pretty good puzzle game, and it's definitely worth it if you enjoyed the Zero Escape series, especially the writing. The puzzles are less mechanical and more psychological in nature, so you kind of have to figure out how people think, or how you think that person would think, and in that regard, it's pretty good. And because of that, it got in at number 25. After that, I decided to be a bit nostalgic and play Ghostbusters the video game remastered. This was a remaster that came out in like 2019. This actually just got right above all of the bad games. Replaying it, the first half of Ghostbusters is awesome. The second half is such a miserable slog, and it's sort of what put this thing at the bottom. I wouldn't say it's an outright bad game, but it's definitely like right above it. And despite being in the forgettable category, I have to put it there. It's at a number 67. And finally, the last game that I played in April was Haste. This is the other game made by the devs of Peak, which I never got to playing. But this is a running roguelike where you play as a character who is just running forward as quickly as she can, escaping what is essentially an apocalypse. I'll say that this game has such a unique feel, and I love how it plays. This is how I feel like a 3D Sonic game should feel. It makes the fast movement feel so good and introduces different ways to speed up that I wish that this was a more structured experience than a roguelike. Especially with how this game uses momentum physics, with how going down hills or landing on a downhill will boost you, similar to how 2D Sonic used to do. I would say this is the closest we'll get to a 2D Sonic in 3D like we'll ever get. And because of that impressiveness that I experienced, it got into rank 27. May. First in May, I played American Fugitive. This is a GTA-like, sort of like the original ones, and it's kind of boring, I'm not gonna lie. It does have a kind of an interesting breaking into house mechanic, but once you learn how to game that, the game is insanely easy and just not really worth it. This wound up in the dirt tier at rank 63. Captain Blood. This is a game that was supposed to release on the OG Xbox and then just kind of got shelved, and then some random team decided to pick it up and finish it. And boy, does it feel like an OG like PS2 Xbox era like God of War like type game, and I enjoy it for what it is. I can't recommend it unless you're someone who enjoys those types of games, but it is fun for what it is, and I would recommend just checking it out. I think it has a demo. It's fantastic, nostalgia trip, but because of its faults, I put it at rank 58. It's not amazing, but it's still good in my opinion. Trepang 2. This is a first-person shooter inspired by the FPS series Fear. This is really, really good. I don't think it has the same aesthetic feeling as the original Fear, considering I played that for the first time last year, but I will say that this game gets the feeling of playing Fear right. It does add its own little quirks and different things to make things interesting, and I applaud them for that, to not just try to remake Fear. And I like that there's a lot more variety in environments than Fear was, because Fear is like 50% corporate office cubicles and crap, and that does get a little tiring at one point. I will say the biggest problem I have with it is this and Fear introduce zombie-like enemies in specific moments, and in these games, those types of enemies are not good, not because they're hard, but because they're brain dead easy to kill. And I think that they needed to do a little bit more tweaking with some of the enemies. But if you are looking for something like Fear, I highly recommend Trepang 2. And because of that, it's at my number 17 spot. The 20th game I played was AI The Somnium Files Nirvana Initiative. This is the sequel to AI The Somnium Files. I like this game, but the way this game mechanically starts relying way too hard on these janky action scenes is a bit much, and I feel like the conclusion is not as good. I will say the big twist for Nirvana Initiative was a lot more of a mindfuck than the original Somnium Files was. But the other issue I would say is the characters in Nirvana Initiative, especially the main characters you play as, are not as interesting as Kaname Date, and so it just kind of suffers in certain areas. In certain ways, it's better than the first game, and in other ways, it's just not as good. And because of that, I put it lower than the original one, and it is at rank 26. All right, Doom the Dark Ages. I had to think about this. I stand by saying that I enjoyed this game. That being said, I do think that this game is not as good as 2016, and I think that this game was an overcorrection from the criticisms of Doom Eternal being way too hardcore. And because of this, Doom the Dark Ages is a bit brain dead. I will have a hot take though. I kind of enjoy the big mech suit fights. I don't like the dragon levels because those take way too long, but the mech suit fights are usually only like 5-minute levels, and I'm okay with having little 5-minute breaks. The dragon levels are like an hour long each, and they suck, and they just drain my energy. I would say that this game might be the weakest in the Doom series, and because of that, it gets rank 45. Next, I played The Precinct. The Precinct is the new game from the devs who made American Fugitive. One, I'm going to say these guys improved a lot with how their game functions. They even added cover mechanics and this like overhead view, and it actually works extremely well. But the big thing about this is you play as a cop in what is a GTA world, and boy does that live up to its promise, because it does feel like you're constantly putting out fires by random players. They aren't random players, they're just random NPCs. But if you fall into that mindset of feeling like you're a cop in a GTA game, this is the game for you. Even after the credits rolled, I continued to play this because I just found it entertaining to be chasing enemies through the city. It's a lot different than running away, and also having the resources to call in more cops and helicopters. And there's something about starting a chase against a criminal and then slowly cranking the dial to make it come off like a 5-star chase, but you're on the other side of it. There's something about it that just really resonated with me in this game. I will say the plot itself is kind of weak. It's not that great, and I would also say that the friendly NPCs could use a little bit of work. They're a bit random in how useful they are. Specifically, they let some criminals get away, or they'll just shoot them sometimes. It was weird. But again, if you want a cop GTA game, I recommend this. And that's why it got at 44. Then we have Labyrinth of the Demon King. I love this game. This is a horror dungeon crawler. For whatever reason, people have started calling dungeon crawlers Kingsfield likes, but this is a dungeon crawler, and this game's really good. It doesn't overstay its welcome. I love that the enemies in this game are not just enemies, they'll fight each other. You do feel like you're in just a pit of hell where everyone is out for themselves. It has one of the most consistent enemies that chases you around and actually causes you to be nervous when they get summoned into a room. The combat is really, really satisfying once you get to learn it and nail it down. It also shows how a ranged weapon is psychotically powerful in this type of environment where everything is set for melee for the most part. And if you've been wanting a like horror game experience that's not too long but is also has some really strong combat, I highly recommend this. Oh, also some really good old-fashioned horror game puzzles like in the original Resident Evil and Silent Hill. And because of all of that, Labyrinth of the Demon King is in my number 4 spot. After that, I played The Horror at High Rook. This is a resource management horror puzzle game, and this game actually, the more that I kind of dwelled on it and replayed a bit of it, I've sort of warmed up to it. However, I do think it has a lot of problems where it comes down to, like, sometimes you're just waiting for stuff to happen in the game, because there's a moment where you sort of just solve the game and you're just waiting for the story things to occur. However, I would say the writing's pretty good for what this game is. I didn't finish all the side quests. Maybe on a second playthrough I'll do that. But this is a pretty solid game if you just want to manage resources, to keep track of 4 character stats, and build the resources you need to solve the mystery at this manor. And it landed at rank 47. Nitro Express. Nitro Express is a platforming arcade shooter game. It reminds me a bit of Contra. With this game, you're able to select whatever guns you want. It also has leveling mechanics specifically with the guns, also with the items you bring into a level. Each gun has its own stats that relate to what stance you're taking when you fire the gun, like jumping, standing still, crouching, moving, or laying down. Each of those will change the damage of the gun you are using at that time. The story is pretty simple, but for this type of game, you don't really need a crazy story. Amazingly good story. You are a new department for the police that specifically deals with rampaging robots in Japan. That's why you are allowed to use guns, especially heavy weapons, more than any other cop in the city. And that's it. It's fun. It's short enough to where I would play it here and there throughout the year as like a bit of a palate cleanser. And because of that, it's at rank 24. June. First game that I finished in June was Silent Hill 2 Remake. I was a bit of a skeptical person when it came to Silent Hill 2 Remake, even though I heard all the good things about it. I just wasn't convinced until I played it myself. Now that I've played it, do I think that Silent Hill 2 Remake is good and is even better than the original? Well, the first one, yes. The second one, I don't entirely agree with. I will say this. If you are someone, or you know someone, that wants to get into the Silent Hill series, and you or them ask, is Silent Hill 2 Remake an okay game to play for them to try to get into it? I would say yes, because for the most part, it is extremely accurate to the original game for the most part. My biggest issue, as someone who has played the original a lot, and I mean an exorbitant amount of time, the remake is like 3 times as long as the original. And in that regard, I don't feel the motivation to replay Silent Hill Remake as much, because at a certain point, you start speedrunning Silent Hill 2, the original, and that will take like 4 hours, maybe 6. Whereas a quick playthrough of the remake is like 10 hours, and I just don't feel like doing that. I stand by what I say, which is I think this is a good entry point for new people, and I will never be upset that someone chose to play this over trying to get some random way to play the original, but I myself will always prefer the original. That's just how I am. Because of this, it got rank 19. After that, I played Tldr Blade. This was a game with a bit of controversy around it. I think the people who glaze this game are doing a bit too much, and I think some of the people who hate this game aren't really giving it a chance. And I will say this, yeah, it's a game about playing as a sexy woman. I did find it funny when I came to the realization that the writing and the plot of Tldr Blade is like a gender-bent version of a typical 7th gen action game, and I just find that funny because Eve is very much the prototypical stoic male protagonist, except she's female. That was very common during that generation. She also has a quirky little funny sidekick character who's there to be the smart one, who is able to create cool little plans, and she has a love interest who has no personality whatsoever. And I just kind of find it funny. On a mechanical level, it is what I will call a narrative Souls-like. What I mean by that is, instead of focusing on the RPG aspects of a Souls game, it's focused on the combat and the story itself. The story of Tldr Blade, I kind of like. I wish they would have done more with the references to humanity and the androids, but maybe we'll explore more of that in the sequel. I would say if you have played the Star Wars Jedi series with Cal Kestis and you enjoyed that, this is like one of those, but a little bit less mechanically broad, because you only have one sword throughout the game. Tldr Blade is at its best when you're doing the story dungeons and the game is using level design in very creative ways instead of the open world, where, I'll be honest, it can get a little boring at times. because of what I've said. It's at rank 18. And to round out June, I played another dirt game, a game I won't remember, The Operator. It's like Cyber Manhunt, but I guess not as good as those because it's rank 62. July. July started with Indiana Jones and The Great Circle. Indiana Jones was a pretty good game for the most part. I'll say this, and I said it in my review already. The first third of the game in the Vatican City is awesome. I love the Vatican City in this game. It's the best the game ever is because you have an environment that is vertical and it's this interweaving of routes and it feels like a genuinely interesting place to explore. But then as the game goes on and you go to the different hub areas, they just get worse and worse because the first area is the Vatican City, the second area is the pyramids in the desert, and the desert's okay, but it's not as interesting as the city. And then the third area is that swamp, and God, I hate that swamp so much. However, despite my issues with the hubs being worse and worse, I do think the game overall stays at a decent quality and is pretty fun. The writing is pretty good. Troy Baker does a really good Harrison Ford impression, and it feels like we're getting a young Harrison Ford. I do think the story gets a little too silly at times. I watched the original trilogy of Indiana Jones, and while there's a couple of silly things that happen, this game kind of has every fight scene be like that. I feel that you could have made the villains a bit more threatening. Also, the final boss sucks. It's just really boring. The end of the game has a sequel tease, and with that, I hope the next game is able to fix some of the issues this game has. So, like I said, it's a really good game, just kind of goes down in quality throughout, and because of that, it's at rank 23. Tormented Souls. This is a kind of forgettable Resident Evil-like. Yeah, I don't remember a lot from this. There's time travel in it, I think, and that's all I kind of remember. It got rank 66. Sunset Overdrive. I always thought of this game as an oddity. It was the one Insomniac game made for Xbox, and I was always interested in that. However, I'm kind of disappointed by this game. The progression for it and the guns are just not really that interesting or good, and I know Insomniac can do better. The other issue I have is the writing is oh god, maybe it's because we've had a decade of Marvel, but it's Marvel tier. But this game was made in 2014, so I don't know if that really applies. The one saving grace this game has is the traversal. The traversal is amazing, and it's a real shame we don't have any game that has been able to quite do it like this since. Outside of that, the rest of this game is kind of fine at best. I will say some of the bosses were really good. This almost wound up in the dirt tier, but it's just good enough to where it's out of that. This is at rank 57. Another Insomniac game I played was Marvel's Spider-Man 2. This is their most recent thing. This game is a mechanical improvement on the first Spider-Man game in a lot of ways, and I would say for the most part, in all those regards, gameplay-wise and city traversal-wise, it's a lot better. I'm not the biggest fan of the wingsuit, but I still think overall it's better. However, the final act of this game is awful. This is one of the biggest narrative collapses I've ever witnessed in a game. It just goes down in quality, and I don't know how this can happen. I'm baffled with how unsatisfying the final act of this game is. It is genuinely interesting, and I think it got nominated for Best Story, and what were the journalists thinking? So this game has just a lot of good gameplay, but kind of a bad story, and in that regard, it got rank 31. RoboCop Rogue City Unfinished Business. After playing RoboCop Rogue City, I was actually kind of excited for this, and in some ways this was disappointing because of that, and I'm to blame for that. The biggest thing is, I don't think this game should be $40. I think it should be $20. It's basically just the action levels of RoboCop Rogue City. And in that regard, it's solid, but the pacing just never feels like it has a time to breathe. And so the story's just kind of, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens. And it's whatever. Because of that, it's at rank 39. The Drifter. This is the Australian point-and-click adventure game where you play as a guy who can resurrect like 15 seconds before he dies every time he dies. And you have to solve puzzles using that mechanic. This game's pretty good, and I would say it uses this mechanic in clever ways up until the final act, which is really weird because the game feels like it's trying to go full on the mechanic, but they don't really use the mechanic well, in my opinion. It's still pretty good, but there have been better point-and-click adventure games out there. I also think that the final moments of the game are a bit of a cop-out, and because of all that, it's at rank 43. The final game that I played for July is The Great Villainess Strategy of Lily. This is a really interesting strategy game that feels partially inspired by Fire Emblem. I kind of like it a lot. I would say that the biggest problem this game has is it doesn't give you enough units until, I would say, the third act in this 6-act game. And because of that, the first 2 acts, despite me really liking this game, do feel very slow. However, I'm kind of a sucker for niche strategy games that try to do something different, and because of that, it's at rank 11. August. We're halfway through the list, and at number 36, we have Ninja Gaiden Ragebound. This is actually a pretty good 2D action platformer. It's definitely built around the concept of speedrunning. There's a lot of talismans in the game that you can use to tweak how you play the game, and some are definitely built in there to make getting through the levels faster at the cost of making them harder. It's definitely a game where you'll have to learn the timings of when and how to strike enemies with heavy attacks or just regular attacks. Overall, though, as just a casual player of it, it's really good, and I even played through this a few times to try to get some of the quicker times. But that being said, any game that gets me to try to beat some time trials and get faster times is good in my book, and that's how it got rank 12. Next, Nobody Wants to Die. This was the detective game about swapping bodies, I think. This is fairly low because I barely remember the plot now, and I'm not going to go any further. It's at rank 59. It's in the tier of I forgot what it was. After that, Mafia: The Old Country. This is a weird one. I really like the story and characters of Mafia: The Old Country. However, the gameplay is such a mixed bag. The shooting's fine, but you actually don't do much of it. A lot of the game is really bad stealth segments. You do a bunch of these chases that are programmed in such a way where you can't fail them, and at a certain point that gets a little bit funny. Despite the issues with the gameplay, the story is what carries you through this game. Also, there's this knife fighting mini game that's bad and is like a major advertising thing for the game, despite being probably the worst part of the game. Despite this game having a rather mixed bag as far as gameplay goes, the story and the characters elevated enough to where I didn't hate going through it, and maybe one day I'll revisit it. But my suggestion is don't get this for the gameplay. If you get this, get it for like $20 to get a decent story. Past that, I can't recommend it for you. This got rank 42. After that, I replayed Ghost of Tsushima. I did not do the DLC, just the main campaign. I will say that this game is at its best in the middle. I do think the first act is pretty good at introducing you to a lot of the mechanics and sort of tutorializing things in a way that makes the game very interesting. And the second act is really where the game shines the most. You have a really good mixture of combat-focused missions, stealth-focused missions. A lot of the side plots start to get fleshed out and get really interesting here. And it has some of the best story moments in a lot of games in recent years. And I still really like this game. I will say the final act is fairly weak in my opinion, not to the point of like Spider-Man 2, but I would say it kind of starts to run out of gas towards the end and feels like they needed a little bit more, especially for some of the side missions. Some of the side missions just end. Looking at the monk's side mission quest, that was really weird. But considering that this is still probably one of my favorite open world games in recent years, it landed at rank 14. After that, I played a very small game called Azeron the Demon Bottle. This is a 2D Zelda-like, very similar to like the original Legend of Zelda or Link to the Past, but it's only like 3 dungeons. This game's only like $3. And so while I won't say it's terrible, it's good, but there's just not a lot to it. And in that regard, it's in a weird spot where it's like, I don't know, I like it. It's just above games that I think are unmemorable, and it could have fell into that, but I could recommend this to someone if they just want like a neat 2-hour experience. And that's how it got at rank 56. The final game of August was Hexel's Infinite. I actually just replayed it and then played a bunch of randomized versions of this. Hexel's is basically a hexagon version of Minesweeper, and I just enjoy it every so often. I dive back into Hexel's, and I got a real hankering for it this year. If you want a hex-based Minesweeper, I recommend these games. There's like 3 Hexel games, and because I like it so much, it is in the rank of 29. September. My 42nd game that I played and finished was Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. On one hand, this is one of my all-time favorite combat systems in a JRPG ever. I absolutely love how this combat system functions, how synergies work, how special moves work, how the materia system plays into it. All of this is great. However, I am starting to question the remake trilogy structure, especially everything that has to do with the phantoms and stuff. I'm hoping we're past all of that. I don't know. I really do hope we're past it because they have an excuse not to do it anymore. The other aspect is the open world could be a lot better. There's a lot of stuff in the open world that's just get to a point and press a button. And it kind of reminds me of Assassin's Creed to a degree, before it got like a revamp, though I wouldn't say it's like a modern Assassin's Creed where it's just scores and scores of crap on the map, but still, I don't think they've quite nailed down the open world. I will say I think it's better than 15's open world on release. I don't think anyone remembers that. Story-wise, though, when it doesn't have to do with the Phantoms, I think it's actually really good. And I think that they do have something here. So I'm kind of mixed. Overall, I did come out more positive than negative, because I looked at it and it's like I enjoyed more of the game than I hated it. And since I'm saying that, I'm going to rank it at 22. Next, I played a small little puzzle game called A Little to the Left, and this is basically a puzzle game that is structured around sorting things and recognizing patterns and that type of thing. And I like it. I will say some of the later ones, especially in the DLC, feel really stretched, but there is a hint system, so I don't know. Despite that, I will say it's very good, and it earned its rank at 28. Number 44, a big one, Hollow Knight Silk Song. And the only note that I have for this video is that it did live up to the hype, in my opinion. I kind of went into it thinking that it would just be another Hollow Knight with a little extra steps, and in some ways it is that, but the way that Hollow Knight Silksong and its world interacts with the player is unlike any other Metroidvania I've ever had. There is a single mechanic in Hollow Knight Silksong that I don't think I've ever seen in another game, and that's the ability to play music, and for everything, whether it's enemies, random NPCs, or whatever, but you play music and they'll sit there and sing a song to your music, and it'll tell the story of what that specific enemy or NPC is about. I know that sounds like not that big of a deal, but it adds so much to the world of Silksong. While I think Hollow Knight is a more consistent and tight experience than Silksong, Silksong has moments in it that I think go above anything that's in Hollow Knight, even if some of that is behind some of the most egregious runbacks to bosses. And because of that, it earned its place at rank number 3. And at 45, we have the worst game of the year for me. I'm not going to go too in-depth on this, but I'll just say this. The one thing I can't abide by more than a bad game or a boring game is a broken game, especially from a AAA studio. And that's why Borderlands 4 is number 70 for me. This is a game, and I even tried to launch it recently while making this list, that I cannot play for more than 5 minutes on my PC. I meet the requirements, I know I do, but the game's so poorly optimized, and it's not like I'm running the game on the highest settings. It just won't run for me for more than 5 minutes. Which is a shame, because I do like the Borderlands games. And like I said, this is rank 70. The next game I played was something I was playing in the background for a while. It is called Proverbs. It's a giant mosaic minesweeper type game. It's fine. It's at rank 65. To round out September, I played a game that I got kind of for free, which is funny, and that is Dying Light the Beast. I got it kind of for free because I purchased the director's cut of Dying Light 2 that went on sale for like $20, and I got this full game for nothing because I had the director's cut. Dying Light the Beast, I would say it's the proper follow-up to the original game. It is much better in both its parkour and its combat than 2 was. 2 felt like they were trying to lean too hard into verticality and a more casualized audience, and The Beast feels like they dropped that and decided to kind of go back, not entirely to the first game, because I will say I still think this is easier, but at least made it a little bit more hard and a little more challenging. They've also introduced more enemies to fight that are more interesting to fight than what you ever fought in the first 2 games, because really you don't have anything other than Goliaths, the volatiles, and humans with pipes and guns, and that's it in the first game, and that's kind of all you had in the second game. With this, they introduce a plethora of new enemy types, and that makes it go a lot further in my opinion. And with that, those improvements that they've made from 2 to this, it has earned the rank number 13. October. I started out October, like you should, with a scary game, and that scary game was Silent Hill F. Silent Hill F is a game that has an amazing story that shines through bad gameplay, specifically bad combat. I decided to finish out a 3rd playthrough, and I'll probably return to get the last couple of endings at another time because I'm kind of done with this game's combat. It wouldn't be so bad if they didn't force you to engage with the combat. Because they force you to engage with this bad combat, it sort of lowers the quality of the game. However, the story itself is phenomenal. Ryukishi 7 has done an amazing job with the Silent Hill story, and I wouldn't mind seeing him do something else, but I wouldn't mind him going on to do more Silent Hill stuff. I will say, if it wasn't for his writing and this story and the acting, I don't think I would have gone through this game 3 times. And you kind of have to do it because this game is meant to be played multiple times. Otherwise, the plot doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You'll miss things. It's a game where the story is carrying the gameplay more than anything else. So it gets the rank 20. After that, I played Logic Bombs. This is the game made by Matthew Matosis, and it's a small little Minesweeper type logic puzzle game. I highly recommend it. It's really good. Check it out if you like those types of games. It got rank 30. This next game kind of proves to me that even if a game is a cult classic, it's still called a classic for a reason. And that's why I greatly enjoyed Trails in the Sky First Chapter. I played the original version of this game a long time ago, and I have to let everyone know that this game is the reason I got into JRPGs. Before, I kind of viewed all JRPGs like Pokemon, because I never liked Pokemon, and so I just assumed everything was like that. It's not, and I think this game was a good experience for me to have, and introduced me to a wider world of games. That being said, this game still retains a lot of the elements of the original game, and while I think some of the storytelling is a little bit dated, I am a bit nostalgic for it. I like it a lot, and for me it still stands up. And because of that, it gets the rank number 5. After that, I played another re-release, which is Yuka Replayley. There's not a lot to say other than this is what Yooka-Laylee should have been on release. This game is more structured like Mario Odyssey now, and there's a couple of drawbacks to that, but overall it's mostly positive, and I could kind of recommend this to someone nowadays. If you already owned an original copy of the game on Steam, they did give a sale for this, which is how I purchased it. That being said, I still think that was a bit too much for someone who had already played it. I would recommend, if you've already played this, probably wait till it's like 10 or 15 bucks. If you're someone who hasn't played this, maybe wait till it's like 20. I will say, despite it being a major improvement, I will say it's still not the best 3D platformer ever. It's good now, like it's something that I wouldn't mind giving to like a cousin of mine to play, and for that, it gets the rank number 40. Next, I played Ninja Gaiden 4, and I kind of deliberated on this one for a bit, and I have to say, I like this game a lot, and this might be very controversial, especially for people who love the Ninja Gaiden series, because Ninja Gaiden 4 is sort of a halfway point of Ninja Gaiden 2 and Metal Gear Rising. And I will say there are some issues with it, but man, do I love playing this game. Once you get a lot of the combos and a lot of the weapons unlocked, I really love this game. There's not a lot of other games that feel like this, and I think if there's ever a demo, check it out, because it's hard to recommend this to someone who enjoys the old Ninja Gaidens, which is a shame, because I think there's room for something like that old Ninja Gaiden type game that's a lot more hard. This is hard, but it's not Ninja Gaiden 1 or 2 hard. Because I am a character action lover, and I think this is probably one of the best games that Platinum has put out in quite a while, and I kind of love it, even though it's a departure for the series. It is better than 3, but even though it's a departure for the series, I kind of love it, even if it has a bit of a messy few levels in the final act. Because of that, it has earned my number 10 spot. The last game I played in October was Agatha Christie's Death on the Nile. And this game is probably the funniest thing in my head, because half of this game is a decent detective story about solving the murder and attempted murders of a woman on a ship on the Nile, and the other half is we did not get the rights to James Bond. Here's our cool OC character from that idea. Enjoy. And that will never not be funny to me. It is so blatantly meant to be a James Bond character, and that's just weird and quirky to me. Aside from it being weird and quirky, it's a pretty decent puzzle game, and I would recommend it for people who enjoy point and clicks and, the Agatha Christie games or the Nancy Drew games. And for being a decent puzzle game, I have ranked it at number 37. November was a busy month for me as far as games go. I started using it to clean up what I needed to play. In that, I first started with Absalom. Absalom is a fantastic beat-em-up roguelike. Unlike something like Hades, which is overhead view, this is more of a side view, something similar to Streets of Rage or TMNT. Absalom, while it doesn't have the writing chops of something like Hades, it does have, in my opinion, a greater differentiation in what it wants to do with its systems. Whereas Hades typically just lets you make a well-rounded character, you're sort of forced to do that. In Absalom, you can make everything revolve around singular attacks. You can make some of the most min-maxed characters I think I've ever seen in a roguelike. It's much closer to something like Binding of Isaac in that regard, and I do have an enjoyment that comes from that. I also like that the characters that you can pick from have a much larger differentiation in how they feel to play than the weapons you get in Hades are. I also like that you can play multiplayer with this game. It's a really fun time with some friends or family and to play through a run or two. This game feels like it's definitely built around multiple people playing it. It's a lot of what I look for in a roguelike, especially an action roguelike. And for those reasons, it is my rank 6. After that, Morta. Morta is the newest game from Scumhead, who is a developer that mostly uses the GZ Doom engine. And with that, this is probably the best game he's put out ever. I wouldn't say this is like the greatest first-person shooter of all time, but it's something I take a lot of joy in playing. It reminds me a lot of like first-person shooters from the late 90s to early 2000s, where there was a time where you would enter different worlds and each world has its own aesthetic rather than like, you know, the typical fire, water, or ice level. Each world in Morta feels like its own unique thing, and I love that. I don't know if this would be high up on a lot of other people's lists, but for me, a game that nails first-person shooting, nails the aesthetic, the only problem, I don't even know if I'd call it a problem with this game, is the writing's a bit thin, but otherwise, it's really good. And with that, it is rank 15. I then decided to play Tangle Tower. Tangle Tower is a pretty decent point-and-click investigation game with some puzzles. There's not a lot else to say about it. If you see the videos of it on its Steam page, you kind of know what you're getting into, and you can easily decide whether or not it's for you. It's something I enjoyed, but it wasn't something that blew my socks off, and it is my rank 51. Next, The Nightling. The Nightling was a bit of a disappointment, especially in the last half of the game, because it is a game with fantastic movement and mobility that is gimped in the second half. The first half of this game feels amazing. Using the shield to slide across the hills in the first area and then getting the ability to glide with the shield just makes everything feel so good. And then you get to the third area and the game just never recovers. It starts focusing more on slow verticality and combat, and this game's combat is not good. The story itself is there. I don't remember it. I'm just kind of sad about The Nightling, because it starts with a lot of promise and it just doesn't live up to it, and it kind of earned its rank at 46. Next was Cultic Chapter 2. I've decided to let DLC be part of this thing. Cultic, in previous years, has been one of my favorite first-person shooters to come out of the boomer shooter genre, I suppose. And for me, Cultic was one of the best, and Cultic Chapter 2 has come out as the finale for the Cultic game as a whole, and it is just as good, if not better, than the first chapter. And I really do love it. I love it so much that I played through it twice. If you are someone who wants a game like Blood, I would highly recommend Cultic. It being one of my favorite first-person shooters in recent years, it's earned the rank of 7. Unavowed was next, and this is a pretty bog-standard Wadget Eye point-and-click adventure game. I wouldn't say it's bad, but I don't really have a lot to say about it. If you like point-and-click adventure games, you'll like this one. There's not a lot else to say. It gets rank 52. Next, I played Gunbrella, a narrative Metroidvania, and I think I said it in my Logging November video, which is that this is, to me, one of the weaker narrative Metroidvanias, and I honestly think it would be better if it just wasn't a Metroidvania, and it was just a linear platforming experience, because it just feels like it doesn't have enough to justify itself as a Metroidvania. It's still really good, but it just doesn't do enough to justify itself. It gets rank 41. I then played Metal Eden. Man, I was kind of looking forward to this game. This was made by the developers of Ruiner, and Ruiner was a really good game. It wasn't the Hotline Miami game that I wanted, but I still think it was a pretty good game in its own right. Metal Eden does a lot of things really, really well, but it just doesn't feel fully baked. It has a lot of UI problems. Some of the guns are still bugged. The movement's really good. It is basically a game inspired by Doom Eternal specifically. And in some areas, I think it's better than Doom Eternal, but it just didn't feel like it was fully ready to be released. And because of that, it's kind of not the best first-person experience. Maybe after a few updates and stuff, maybe get it for like 20 bucks. It gets rank 38. After that, I went back and played a classic for myself, which is Hard West 2. Hard West 2 is one of the most aggressive XCOM-likes there is on the market, and if you've ever wanted an XCOM game that didn't center around going into Overwatch and encourages offense in very clever ways, I highly recommend Hard West 2. It does struggle with some of the level design in my opinion, but overall it's still one of the best XCOM style games there is. You also don't need to have played the first Hard West to understand what's going on in Hard West 2. It's its own story. It got rank number 33. Then, a big game that kind of came in all of a sudden that took over the industry, Dispatch. Dispatch is the new game from former Telltale talent, and I think that this is the best Telltale-like game there is on the market. It fixes a lot of the issues that previous games have had. It has probably the best structure of any Telltale-style game, and it has some of the best characters. It does still suffer from some specific problems that Telltale games have always suffered from, specifically weak antagonists. That being said, I do think Ad Hoc, the new studio making this game, does have the ability to address these problems in later games. And because this game just kind of came out and really nailed everything, it has gotten rank number 8. After that, I played Fist Forged in Shadow Torch. Fist Forged in Shadow Torch is a Metroidvania with a deep character action combo system that is sort of wasted on this game. The reason I say it's wasted is that you never have any enemies that the combat system's really made for. It's a bit too much for the game it's in. The main reason I played this game is that their sequel, Zoopunk, is coming out, and it looks like they're making it a 3D character action game. I'm kind of hoping that they take what they learned from this game and use it to make a better character action type game with Zoopunk. Outside of the character action stuff, Fist is sort of a very basic Metroidvania. It's pretty good, but it's not something that I think you have to play. It gets rank 36. Then I played Ghost Runner. Ghost Runner is a fast, speedrunning, first-person slasher, I guess, with parkour. This game is extremely tightly designed, and it has very few problems. The biggest thing is I'm just not a speedrunner type person, but I think that this game does a lot extremely well to encourage getting better and better at going through the levels. It also has a very interesting perk system where you can trade out different perks with this Tetris style system. Because of its very interesting nature and something that it forced me to do even though I'm not the biggest fan of it, it gets rank 32. I then played Ghost Runner 2, and I feel like Ghost Runner 2 was an attempt to expand what Ghost Runner did, and in a lot of ways it diluted what was good about Ghost Runner. It changed the perk system, it changed how a lot of movement and stuff worked. It changed the controls, some good, some bad. It added a motorcycle, which is cool, but feels a bit too unwieldy for this type of game. Also, you get gliding in the last few chapters, and everything they seem to add feels like it wasn't as sharply designed as the first game. And because of that, it got pushed down a couple of ranks to rank 35. December. So December started with Ball X Pit, or Ball Pit, or Ball Cross Pit, I'm not sure. After ruminating on this game for a little bit, I think I love it. Ball Pit is the quintessential roguelike experience for me. It is a game that is built around you logging into it, playing like one round that'll take 15 minutes, and then you can either decide to continue going and do one more 15-minute thing, or you can leave. I feel like it's the perfect type of game for me for when I just want to unwind between games or when I just get home. And while I think that some people might be overselling how deep it is, I think it handles a lot of what it does extremely well. I think that the Pong style shooting is amazing, and I think all the mechanics around picking different characters to go into the roguelike is very well done. I think the combinations and synergies you can create are almost endless and never ending. The biggest issue I kind of have with it is I think the village building is kind of weak and not that interesting, but considering the main thing you're going to be doing is going into dungeons to fight things for 15 minutes, that's not that big of a downside. But yeah, it's the perfect roguelike for me. Something that I can get in, get out, and sometimes I'll even have really good memories of what I just did. With that, it has earned the rank number 9. I then had a bit of nostalgia and decided to replay Lost Planet Extreme Condition, or just not Lost Planet to most people. This was one of Capcom's first games in the 7th gen. In fact, I got the date wrong. It came out in 2006, so it's a 20-year-old game. And I kind of like playing these old games because you get to experience what developers were thinking was a good idea and what wasn't, because things hadn't been decided yet on how third-person shooting should function. Specifically, this was out, I don't know if before or at the same time as the first Gears of War. And so this was not a cover-based shooter. It was more mobile because you had a little grappling hook, and also it was focused around mechs. In that way, I've said before, it's like the first Titanfall type game. And it is a game that I have immense amount of joy playing, and I even have good memories of the multiplayer. Unfortunately, that doesn't work anymore. Do I think it fully holds up? Not really, but it's still a good time for a playthrough here or there, and so it gets ranked 54. I then decided to play not Lost Planet 2 because that was a purely multiplayer game, but Lost Planet 3. And boy, that was bad. That was really bad. I don't think I've played a game in a series that feels like it was supposed to be a reboot for the series, but it's considered a sequel or a prequel. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what Lost Planet 3 is. It feels like it's not sure what it is either. I can't recommend it either because it's like a bad version of like a combination of Gears of War and Dead Space 3, and Dead Space 3 was already disappointing. It is woefully undercooked too. You can accidentally set off the same cutscene multiple times by just touching a certain area on the map. It is such a weird experience. I just don't know what to say about Lost Planet 3, except for it was the third worst game I played this year, and so it gets to be the last game that I put in the Burning Forest, because it's at number 68. And finally, I've been saving this one for last. I kind of figured I would because of what happened earlier in the year. I mentioned in my logging December video that the final game that I played this year and finished was something I had mentioned earlier in the year, but I had never said I finished the game. That game is Clair Obscur Expedition 33. Very clearly, if you've paid attention to all the numbers that have been taken so far, this is my number 1. Expedition 33 has had a lot said about it, and I don't have a lot new things to say about it. It's a game that is about how art affects us, how art can help us with grief, specifically grief, how art can change worlds. It's also about how grief affects us, how grief affects our decisions, and how some decisions while grieving are difficult and need to be made. It is a game that I'm glad that I played. It is, for me, one of the things that I look for in video games the most. People who play games, gamers, myself included, consistently complain that modern video games are kind of losing their soul in a lot of ways, and I agree with that. And I have been a giant proponent of pushing for like the AA smaller market, and typically a lot of people view that as a market where you sort of get less well-polished versions of what AAA games can put out, but I've always viewed it as where you get the diamonds in the roughs. Yeah, sure, you're going to get a lot of these little experiments that aren't 100% cooked, but occasionally you get those diamonds like Clair Obscur. Clair Obscur is not only everything I want in a video game, especially a JRPG, but everything that I want from the industry as a whole. Something made in budget that wasn't going to break the bank if it didn't sell 10 million copies. Something that, even if it developed a cult following, that it would still be successful. And now it's gotten a lot more, and I have my own opinions about what will be the future of Sandfall Interactive, but I think that Clair Obscur has come out and proven that there is room for these smaller games, that there is room to be made for these games made by these up-and-coming developers, because we're getting a lot more of these new devs coming out. A lot of them might end up making slop, but that's sort of the nature of the industry. I would rather a lot of new games trying things than just the same developers and publishers making the same games and the same franchises over and over. Clair Obscur is something that puts a lot of faith back in the industry for me. Even though I wasn't losing entire faith, for me, it's something that has reassured me that this industry still has a lot of life left in it as far as soul goes. So congrats to Sandfall Interactive and Expedition 33. You are my #1 game of the year.
Clair obscur trouveras-tu, trouveras effet. Clair obscur, noir et haut peinture trouveras sans elle.
Alright, here's the outro. I'll just have the top 10 on the screen, so it's not going to be too exciting. That's fine. I kind of like looking at this top 10 because it's not a lot of AAA games. You got 2, technically 3 if you want to count Trails in the Sky, so I'll just say 3. But yeah, no, this was a year for the indies and the AA space, in my opinion. Honestly, this was probably one of the best years that I've had in video games in a while. I only played like 3 games that I think were bad. I know that I have a ranking system here, and you got like ranks between like 1 to 70, but like outside of the bottom 3, everything else was either good or at worst okay. The 9 games above the bottom 3 are just okay and not really bad. I will put a link to a Google Drive with my spreadsheet that I used to like put this together, that I updated throughout the year. I'm actually pretty happy with this year. I did fail to do a weekly video this year. That was the plan, and I just couldn't do it. I got burnt out really quick, and I just realized I couldn't do it. I wasn't finishing games anymore. I was focusing on making videos, and I stopped having fun, so I quickly adjusted on that one. That being said, I am proud of my 2025 YouTube. I did put a lot more videos out than I did in 2024. And I've gotten a lot better at making videos. I also did that podcast. Thanks, Holden and Ross, if you're watching this. Even though I spelled Holden's name wrong. I'm sorry, dude. I think I figured out a standard for my demo videos. I think I'm just going to be sticking to 5 per Next Fest, because 15's too much and 10's too much. 5 seems to be just right for me. And I'll continue doing the logging videos. The plan for next year is to get more videos out more regularly. I might do some scripted topic videos and maybe some scripted reviews. No promises on that. If you're someone who watches my videos, no matter how much you watch them or how often you do, I just want to say thank you. I enjoy doing this. I'm glad that I started doing this in the last couple of years, even though I put it off for way too long. And no matter how many views I get, I'm happy. And so with that, I would like to say Happy New Year to everyone, and let's look forward to 2026. This is the Red Riot Robot signing out.
Le vent déchire